One day to go, England against South Africa at Twickenham. Yesterday, I did a video reflecting on the team news, which came out on Thursday. Today, it's a more general preview of the game. How do you see it going and what are the key areas going to be? I'm going to try and get into that in a little bit more detail, but you can have your say in the comments section whilst you're here as well. And I appreciate you clicking on the video. Then put a thumbs up on it, like the video, and I would absolutely love it if you subscribe to the channel. If you just hit that subscribe button, you will not miss a thing. But welcome back, everyone. I keep saying it. I said it in the last video. Say it again on this one. I cannot wait for the weekend. I cannot wait for the evening game at Twickenham. I'm going to be there tomorrow, England, South Africa, and all of that entails. This is a massive game and a massive rivalry, I think. Bit of a one-sided rivalry in recent history. South Africa have won those two massive games in the World Cup. They beat England the last time they played at Twickenham as well, which was Eddie Jones's last game, when South Africa defeated them pretty comprehensively, I thought. But this is a rivalry. There is bad blood between the players, and I hope, in a healthy way, we see that on the pitch on the weekend. I think it's going to be pretty bruising and intense, and the crowd are going to be into it. With the later kickoff, it always adds a slightly different dimension. Massive rivalry, massive game. As I say, it's really, really exciting. And actually, do you know what? I hope it lives up to the hype. Because this time last week, I was sitting on a Friday looking forward to Ireland against New Zealand. Now, I loved that game, but as a rugby purist, as a real arm wrestle, but there were loads of mistakes. Neither team were at their best, and New Zealand, credit to them, did really well to win the game. But I hope this match lives up to the hype around it. And actually, there is a real chance that it could be similar to that Ireland and New Zealand game, because I think it'll be another arm wrestle. I think it'll be quite tactical. I guess the main hope is we don't see the level of mistakes that we saw at the Aviva in Dublin, and that both teams are able to go out there and execute pretty well and put pressure on and all that sort of stuff. So what sort of game are we going to see? What's the game style here? Yesterday in the video, speaking about England's selection, I spoke about Freddie Stewart at fullback, and the obvious thing there is the aerial game. And the kicking game, I think, is key for England. I think it's impossible to get away from that. I think the kicking game leads to a territorial game, and they want to play that in the South African half of the pitch because their defence hasn't been great. If they are having to do a lot of defending in their own half with all of the weapons in this box team, yeah, I think England could be under a little bit of pressure. But speaking about the kicking game in particular, I think we need to chat about it. Because there is a trend this autumn, isn't there? World Rugby have brought in this trial or this change in the laws about not being able to block off the receiving kicker, not being able to chaperone, essentially, making it more of a competition. Now that I think is a really positive change, because for a long time we saw that the wall of kind of forwards backing towards their own half or their own player, and it didn't really create any sort of competition. The rule change is a really positive one, but I think it is also having a really big impact. And I was reading an article in the Times over here this morning about how England have been frustrated because the change got brought in quite last minute, and that has massively impacted how they want to attack. That was a pretty key area, I think, of how England operated their kicking game before the change, and they've had to rip that up and try and adjust to it. And I suppose off the back of that, it leads me on to saying England can't just rely on a kicking game. They can't just hoof it up in the air and box kick it and compete and chase and try and tap it back. Whilst that will be an important part of what they try and do tomorrow, they have to have a more varied game. In essence, I don't think we're going to see a replica of the World Cup semi-final, which is what England did. But this England team have changed quite a lot in terms of a lot of the personnel, experienced players that they no longer have. And I think they have to keep it more varied. The kicking game is crucial, but they can't just rely on that. If they are able to get front football, if they are able to get territory, they have to be able to go for the kill as well. They have to be able to try and ask more questions of this South African team than purely kicking it up in the air, kicking it into the corner, doing what they kind of tried to do in the World Cup semi-final to great effect until late on when South Africa did brilliantly to win that game. And I guess that brings me on to South Africa, because I can sit here and speak about England. We can try and analyse it, look at the team, try and assess and work out what Steve Borthwick and his coaches have planned and what they want to do. But I think from a South African point of view, and if you're a Springbok fan watching this video, you're probably sat there thinking, Well, I'm not too worried what England are going to do, because I think South Africa have the strength in depth and have the all-round game to match England in almost all areas. I think that will be the South African mindset. They're not going to be fearful of what England are going to do, because if we want to talk about power, as I always do on the channel, they've got it in bucket loads. If you want to talk about that back line, I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it, really? Grant Williams and Marnie Libbok, the running threat they pose at 9 and 10, the experience in the centres of Dialende and Creel, and the absolute blockbuster pace, athleticism in the back three of Aronza, Colby and Fassi. Plus then obviously, you know, in the pack we talk about power, but you've also got Jasper Wiese, who's an incredibly dynamic ball carrier. They have so many threats that I think they will look at England and they won't be too afraid. They will back themselves to be able to deal whatever England throws at them, which I suppose brings me on to my final point here, which is if we are talking about what do England try and do, and I think the reason that we're looking at this rather than saying what are South Africa going to try and do, the question I'm asking is what are England going to try and do, because we know how good South Africa are, and I think they'll be favourites for this game. So it's how can England upset them? And if they are to, despite the fact that South Africa are able to deal with what comes at them, it requires England, I think, to be close to perfect. I'll never forget that World Cup semi-final and being sat in the Stade de France and watching that game unfold and being there thinking, England are nailing this. Like, it was a tight game, but in terms of the game plan and the fact that no one gave England too much of a chance, England were executing their game plan perfectly. Every player was on song, was singing from the same hymn sheet, knew exactly what they had to do, and were executing it brilliantly. And I think it requires that again this weekend from England, but for the full 80. And that is a huge, huge challenge. I do think England are capable of it, by the way. I don't think they're going to win. Partly because actually I've seen quite a lot of people this week predict them to win. I don't think they're going to. They do have the capability to do it, but they have to be close to perfect, is how I view this game. And I suppose the final thing to finish with here is the bench. South Africa generally get absolutely bucket loads out of their bench. And England, actually, they have not got out of their replacements what they've wanted to this autumn. There's been loads of concerns for England. It's been one of the biggest concerns, I think, is England's bench has not had a big enough impact. The front row will be massive. Again, I can reference back to the last two World Cups when South Africa have won in the final and the semi. England's front row has to do better at competing there when they come on. Dan Cole will be important for that, I think. But Nick Asikwe and Alex Dombrandt haven't had enough of an impact on both sides of the ball. Tom Roebuck, I'm excited to see him come on, by the way. I don't understand all the criticism coming George Ford's way. I think he's a little unfortunate, actually. I think George Ford is becoming the guy that people fall back on to criticise when it's not going well, despite the fact that there is a lot of body of evidence, I think, for how brilliant he can be. So I don't have a problem with him still being named in the squad, essentially. I'll leave it there. What sort of game do you think we're going to get this weekend? And how do you see it going, and what is your prediction? I'm expecting most of you to say it's going to be a Bok win, but I think it'll be a great occasion. Under the lights, Twickenham, everyone going to have been in the pub for about 5 hours beforehand. It'll be an awesome atmosphere. I think the physicality and intensity will be at another level. England have to take it to another level this weekend. They have to be in a different place. Otherwise, they'll lose quite convincingly. And I think this team will get to a different place because their best performances have often come when they've been written off. Ireland in the Six Nations, Argentina at the start of the World Cup, the South Africa game that I've referenced a number of times. It's going to be awesome. I look forward to reading your comments. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.